Morning, everybody. Welcome to pre-recorded demo for week 6 potatoes. Again, this is being recorded and it will be played, or it can be played by you anytime that you require it. I do not have an edit button in here or a stop and start button, so I'm just going to go through it. It won't be that long, probably about an hour, hour and a half at the most. You have the option to fast forward it, or for that matter, play it whenever you want to. So just a couple of links to go through. Everybody knows this is my introduction slide. You can see the manual right posted out there. You're going to need Kahoot because you will play it by yourself, and I'll show you how to go about it. But download all of these so that you can use them during the class or during this demo. So moving along to the next slide. Last week we cooked our vegetables, and I just want to go through a couple of those guidelines in terms of the skills that we went through. We were blanching, we were refreshing, reheating. We definitely glazed our carrots, we roasted our root vegetables, and then we wilted our green leafy vegetables. A couple of things to keep in mind while blanching. It's really important to have the water at boiling temperature, which is 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees centigrade. We do not want to add too much of ingredients to that water because it will cool the water down, and thus getting your vegetables overcooked or gray for that matter when you're cooking green vegetables. Once the vegetables are cooked, you need to refresh them, that is, place them in an ice bath, and the purpose is for stopping the cooking or shocking, like we like to call it. In order to reheat or reserve those vegetables, same water, seasoned, has to be reheated, and then you can serve it from there. From a glazing perspective, it's important to make sure that the carrots are cooked, not overly mushy. It has a cooked crunch in it. And if you have too much of liquid left over in the pan, take away your carrots, reduce the glaze, and return your carrots back in there. So that's how you go about creating your glazed carrots. Roasted root vegetables, the trick is always the toughest piece of vegetable that takes the longest time to cook. Generally, it's rutabaga. Beets do have an issue as well. Last week, my observation from all the presentations, most people did really well. Probably a little bit of less caramelization because of the starting point, but you could place it in a pan, get some color, and then eventually finish it in the oven. Again, the test is always to make sure you are using a fork to test the doneness of that vegetable. Okay. Last but not the least, the Swiss chard in the ribs, or you have to de-rib the leaves. It's important to make sure that you cook the ribs really, really well prior to adding the leaves. Most students had their leaves a little too big. They were almost like hanging on the bottom of their plates, or should I say forks and spoon. You want to make sure they're bite-sized and they don't hang out of your mouth. And they also are cooked properly, so that once your stems are cooked, you add your leaves into it, and that's how you would go about serving your wilted Swiss chard. Okay, so just to remind you, you can go into your Padlet. This is a foundations diary where you can post in all of your pictures and continue to do so. Use the current skills and elaborate on what you could use them for other preparations. I'd absolutely love to see some more pictures and some more participation on this page. Again, at the end of the semester, which is the end of foundations, we'll go back and revisit that page, and you will realize how much of progress you have made. But it's always going to be there for the entire semester, so feel free to use that hyperlink there to your Padlet page. Okay, so moving along, for this week, what are we going to learn? We are going to focus on potatoes, and we are going to prepare French fries, Dauphine potatoes, pomme puree or potato puree, and roasted fingerling potatoes. The objectives for this week is, first and foremost, we need to learn how to identify the different varieties of potatoes, applying various cooking methods to these potatoes, such as boil, deep fry, roast, and bake. Blanching in fat, really, really important skill. That means the potatoes, the French fries, are always cooked twice. The first time it is cooked, it is blanched in fat at a very low temperature so that it gets done to a certain degree. It's almost cooked fully, however, it does not have any color. And then the second time we blanch or we fry them at a really high temperature, 375 to almost 400 degrees, and we want to get them nice and golden brown. So that's how we go about cooking our potatoes, and blanching in fat is one of those important skills. Ricing the potatoes is just generally pureeing the potatoes to a small fine puree, nice and smooth, no lumps whatsoever. Piping is a great skill. Again, you're going to need your piping bags for this class. If you don't have one, I suggest you please buy one. There are two types of nozzles we'll be using, or tips, piping tips. One is a star tip and one is a plain tip, which is known as a Savoy tip, which has no, should I say, grooves on it. So it's just plain. And then last but not the least, we're going to layer potato slices and create a pomme dauphine, or again, a gratin potato. So it really depends on how you want to call it. It's got layers of cheese, cream, and everything else, and then it is baked in the oven. Now, the important part to keep in mind is the size of the foil pan. So the foil pan will make a big difference in terms of how this thing will bake, and we will talk about that when we come to that slide. Again, the resources for this class, it's really important to understand you have all of these available, especially with Wiley. And if you open up these hyperlinks, it will take you straight to the Wiley page. You will see all the different links that are including some great videos on understanding potatoes, creating various recipes, and using some equipment as well. And I also want to promote Ontario Foodland in terms of their website and where you get what ingredients, what's in season. Really, really important. Please buy local. Please make sure you support the farmers, especially when you're cooking with vegetables and other ingredients in Ontario. Okay, moving along. Our new ingredients for this week, and as you can see on the top left-hand side is piping tips, and these are all edged, and they have different numbers. And if you look very closely, each and every one of them does have some amount of identification in terms of numbers written on the side here, and that's how it tells you what is the actual size of the number. Some are 860, 869. I can't even see that one. But any which ways, that's how you would go about using the appropriate tip for the purpose of piping and using a piping bag. Now, there are certain guidelines in terms of do's and don'ts with the piping bags. After you finish using them, you're meant to wash them, air dry them so that they do not get fungus, or if you put them in your toolbox, they're perfectly dried. And you usually take some pieces of paper towel and you really push them into the paper piping bag so that it air dries naturally. 2 or 3 other types of ingredients. We're going to talk about the Gruyere cheese, which is right here in the center. The Gruyere cheese is, again, it's almost a semi-hard yellow Swiss cheese. So it comes from Switzerland, and it is made of cow's milk, and it's excellent for melting. And Gruyere cheese is one of those cheeses that is high in fat content and is used for the preparation of fondues and stuff like that. So this is one of the cheese that we'll be using today preparing the Dauphine potatoes. The second cheese is very common and popular that we use it almost on a daily basis and we take it for granted, but there is an actual beautiful process goes about making the Parmesan cheese, or Parmigiano Reggiano. It's an Italian hard grating cheese. It is aged generally from anywhere from 12 months to 36 months. Again, it's made out of cow's milk. And what's most unique about this cheese, it has a really, really thick rind on the outside. And if you want to make sure you're buying an authentic piece of cheese, you will always see the name that is embedded on the side of the rind. So this is very natural and normal. The cheese inside is semi-hard. It can be grated, but the rind generally is not edible. So the rind is usually used sometimes to prepare tomato sauces or other types of sauces to loan its flavors. It's also grated and used in various other preparations. I always recommend buying this cheese as a block. Do not buy the pre-grated cheese because there's too many impurities that are in there, thrown in there, but the block is the real deal. So that's what you would want to go about when you're buying your cheese. Last but not the least is rosemary. Rosemary, very common, grows really well, especially in our climates here in Ontario. It's really woody. When I say woody, in the sense, it's really firm and rigid. You only use the leaves. The stems are great as well for stocks and other preparations. It is aromatic. It's pungent in flavor. And you want to use it very carefully because it has a property of overpowering a preparation. It's that potent. So it's almost like the nutmeg, where you add too much of it, it can overpower. And same way with the rosemary. You do not want to add too much of it in there. Okay. So moving along, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of understanding potatoes. And there are a few slides here, so please pay attention. So potatoes are one of the most versatile vegetables that can be used for anything and everything. Broadly classified, there are 2 types of potatoes. One is waxy and one is mealy. So we'll just stick with that for the time being. We'll go into more detail later on with the potatoes. You have to identify what type of potato it is and what is the best cooking method or what is the best product that you can use it for. Not necessarily all potatoes can be used for all preparations, okay? You have to make sure you identify the high quality of potatoes for that type of preparation. Generally speaking, potatoes are always stored in a cool, dry place. They are never refrigerated. If you refrigerate potatoes, the starch turns into sugars and they usually tend to get black. So you don't want to store them in the refrigerator. Always a cool, dark place. And we're going to discuss various market forms that you get your potatoes in the market these days. Composition of a potato. Potato is a tuber. It grows under the earth. Therefore, it has a couple types of buds that we call, or eyes on the potato that usually you have to take off, but those eyes or buds are usually shoot off to become newer potatoes. So that's how it is composed. And they are definitely classified depending on their starch content. Okay, so that's really important to keep in mind as well. The two broad classifications of potatoes is waxy and mealy, and I'll go with waxy first. So waxy potatoes have a high moisture content, they have a high sugar content, but they have a low starch content. The flesh can be white, yellow, purple, or even blue. So that's all classified under waxy. The skins can be white, red, yellow, or blue. So same thing in terms of color, same thing in terms of the skin as well. On the other hand, mealy, mature, or starchy potatoes have a low sugar content, but high starch content. So that's easy to keep in mind with the mealy, starchy, high starch content. It's light, it's dry, and really mealy as in it flakes after it is cooked. Okay, so these are the broad classification of the potatoes: waxy and mealy, or let's call it starchy. Mealy and starchy are pretty much the same. So that's how we'll go about classifying these two types of potatoes. Okay. What happens to these potatoes when we apply heat? The waxy potatoes tend to become dense, solid, moist texture, but stay intact. Works well for gratin potatoes so that when it coagulates, it stays together. Potato cakes for that matter, or using it for salads. Again, waxy potatoes are great for making salads, gratin, dauphinoise, or potato cakes. On the other hand, the mealy and starchy potatoes are dry and fluffy in texture when it's cooked. And it is great for frying. So French fries, baked potatoes, or for that matter, mashed potatoes. Okay, so here's where the classification gets broader and more specific into what type of potatoes we are using for what preparations. A couple of varieties of potatoes. Again, new potatoes are generally just new, as in they're not yet formed. They're really small. They have a very, very thin skin on the surface. And generally, new potatoes, in my experience, we never usually take off the skin. We cook them with the skin. Again, any potatoes that are cooked before it really matures are more considered as new potatoes. Russets, really the one on the bottom of the screen, is your king of potatoes. Amazing, amazing potatoes, really high in starch content. The colors generally range from brown to reddish skins, sometimes even flash. Elongated shape, there's a big telltale of it, elongated shape. The skin is really, really tough and needs to be peeled off. So one of the best potatoes that you can use for French fries is a russet, but make sure you peel off the skin. And then on the top right-hand side is the yellow flesh. So it's almost a medium-sized potato. And again, it really depends on where it is growing. It's used for various types of preparations. And again, a Yukon Gold potato is a yellow flesh potato. And that's what the potato we use in terms of creating mashed potatoes and everything else. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to continue with the variety of potatoes. We have just talked about new potatoes, russet potatoes, and yellow flesh, and we are going to move along. The second slide is, again, further discussion on potatoes in terms of varieties. Blue or purple flesh potatoes, and arguably they come under the broad classification. They could be waxy or they could be starchy, depending on their variety. But I need you to understand that these potatoes are natural and then they are grown, and it's just the pigmentation that makes them so. The last potato that we will be using today is known as roasted fingerling potatoes. I'm sorry, it's called fingerling potatoes. We will be roasting them. They are usually firm, they are waxy, they are long, narrow shape. You cannot mistake them because when you view them, they will look like arguably thicker fingers, should I say. And then you have the red skin potatoes. It could be, again, could be white, it could be pink, it could be a yellow flesh as well. And most of them are waxy potatoes. They're really, really small and they're almost the size or diameter of a toonie shape. And they really work well in terms of preparing it for salads and what have you, other preparations. This is a slide that I just placed here for the purpose of identifying the different types of potatoes. So we have something known as sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are tubers, for that matter, generally have really pointed ends, and they're really unrelated to potatoes or yams, for that matter. Okay. The two types of sweet potatoes are creamy white or deep orange. So I have placed a couple of pictures in there for you to identify the difference between the different types of sweet potatoes. Now, yams are an entirely, totally different vegetable altogether, and they are starchy and white in their flesh. And as you can see in the slide or in the picture on your right-hand side, right in the center for yams, that's what a yam is. Now, the picture which is on the left of the yam is a cassava, and it has nothing to do with potatoes. I just needed to place it in there because I needed you to understand the difference between a cassava and a yam. They almost look similar, but at the same time, cassava is a different vegetable. It's a tuber as well, but it's a different vegetable altogether. Okay, so moving along. When we're talking about quality of potatoes, and this slide, if you can see it clearly on your left-hand side, is a potato which the skin has just sliced on the surface, and you can see the inside has got a very greenish hue on the outsides, and that is something known as soline. And what is soline? Soline is a poisonous, should I say, substance that is available in potatoes when potatoes are exposed for extended period of time to sunlight. And that's why we always store our potatoes in cool, dark places. Excessive amounts of soline does tend to cause food poisoning, and you need to be aware about it in terms of when you are cooking it. Now, there are some potatoes that do have some pieces of soline. You just get around it and you can work with it. But otherwise, if all your potatoes have this greenish hue on it, I would suggest throwing it out and not using it for the purpose of cooking. Again, quality of potatoes, firm, not soft and not shriveled, and in terms of the skin on the surface, has to have a dry skin, shallow eyes, as in the eye should not be budding or sprouting in them. That means the potatoes have already started to bud. In terms of placing the potatoes, if they are placed in the refrigerator, they tend to turn their starch into sugar, so you want to be careful about their storage. And again, all the green parts should be taken off before cooking. Okay, absence of blemishes and cracks rather is more from a harvesting perspective. When the machines are going in and they hurt the potatoes, that's when you get cracks in them. One more important thing to keep in mind: when you cut the potato open or you peel your potato, they have to be kept in cold water. The reason being is you want to prevent the potatoes from oxidizing. So any potato that is exposed to the air is going to oxidize and turn black on you. Therefore, it is really important for you to place your potatoes after they are peeled and cut open in cold water. Okay, so this is the most ideal way to store your potatoes after they are peeled. For potatoes, when you buy it off the market, again, we've spoken about this. Keep it in a cool, dry place, ideally at about 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Here are some of the market forms of potatoes that are formed. First and foremost, you get them fresh, unprocessed. We get them peeled as well. So you can, when you get them peeled, they come in bags and you store them in a refrigerator. The shelf life is about 5 to 7 days. Trust me, you get potatoes that are peeled in a can as well. All you need to do is open the can, drain off the water, and your potatoes are ready to cook. In my experience, these potatoes generally tend to be a little bit soft. These days, you get pre-fried French fries. Yes, so they are blanched in deep fat, they are frozen, available in various size, cuts, textures, and you cook it from a frozen straight. You do not thaw these potatoes that are pre-fried and frozen. Generally, the guideline of the temperature is about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. You do not go lower than that when you're cooking these French fries. Refrigerated fries are also available. So again, from a different market form. Other frozen prepared products such as hash browns, puffs, stuffed, baked, and croquettes. Croquettes is a picture I've placed right up there on the screen on the top right-hand side. Croquettes is basically mashed potatoes that have been piped out into cylinders, and then you bread them or you pane them into 3 stages. You start with the flour, then you go into your egg wash, and eventually into your breadcrumbs. And then you deep fry them, and that's how you would serve a croquette. So croquettes are nothing but cylinders of mashed potatoes which have been paneed in your breadcrumbs. Okay. Last but not the least, the picture on the bottom of your screen is dehydrated or potato flakes. And they are awesome in terms of adjusting preparations. Mind you, you can make mashed potatoes from scratch. All you need to do is just rehydrate them with a little bit of water or milk, and you have your mashed potatoes ready to go. Very good use for purpose of thickening soups or thickening some other preparations, or just making sure you have the right consistency of your mashed potato and whatever else you require to use it for. Okay, so this week we will be talking about French fries. We're going to talk about fat blanching, which is a low temperature, and then we are going to fry our potatoes, deep fry them. That is the skill for making French fries. Now, right here, I'm going to say it. If you do not have the proper deep fat fryer in your homes, please do not deep fry. I would rather you place your potatoes, once they're cut the natural size, place them in the oven or toss them in a little bit of vegetable oil, just like we did for the roasted root vegetables. Place them on a tray with parchment paper and bake these potatoes till they're done. Please do not attempt to deep fry these potatoes because they can be a hazard. So if you do not have a deep fat fryer at home, I recommend not frying your French fries. Then we are going to prepare something known as Dauphine Noir. Dauphine Noir is a French classical term. It's also the same potato that we would call a gratin, which is the slicing of those potatoes. Then we're going to layer them with the cheese and the cream, and then we're going to bake them till a nice golden brown color. Last but not the least, we're going to make a basic potato puree or pomme puree, whatever you want to call it. We're just going to boil the potatoes. We need to use a ricer or a moulie in order to mash them. And after they are mashed, we're going to return them back to the stove. I'm going to add in the cream, and we're going to add in a little bit of milk, a nutmeg, salt and pepper, of course, and we're going to prepare a mashed potato. Consistency of this potato is really important. We are also going to be using a piping bag to pipe the finished product of this mashed potato. Last but not the least, we're going to roast fingerling potatoes, and the technique there, or the skill there, is roasting. So simple, potatoes washed, cut into half, toss them up in a little bit of oil, salt and pepper on a tray into the oven and roast them. And those are how we will go about preparing these roast potatoes. So these are the skills for this week that the chefs are going to be looked for in terms of evaluation. So next slide is we're going to go through all the skills in terms of the videos that are required for preparation of these classes. And if you want to see all the videos, all you do is just press on that hyperlink and you will get the playlist of all the potato, should I say, videos in here. And if I'm not mistaken, there are about 17 videos in here that you require to go through. So let's go through them individually, and then I will go through a couple of do's and don'ts in terms of with these skills. So the first one we're going to talk about is French fries. And as you can see from the 3 pictures on the side, first and foremost, the potatoes are cut and they are kept in a steel bowl of water. They have to be submerged thoroughly. That means you do not expose those potatoes to oxygen or the air. Otherwise, they will oxidize on you and turn brown. Second, we're going to fat blanch them. Fat blanching is we're going to cook these potatoes at 275 degrees Fahrenheit with absolutely little or no color. Now, if you do not fat blanch them properly, they will turn brown or black on you even before you finish frying those French fries, and that color will not go away. The reason why we fat blanch our potatoes is to reduce the cooking time. Now, if you go into a big operation and, you know, some fast food place that serves French fries over and over again, their fries are pre-made. We also would use the same technique in the industry where we would pre-blanch the French fries and we would place them on a tray into the refrigerator. And whenever you get that order, you would pick up the portion that you require and refry them at a high temperature of 375 degrees till they are golden brown. Remember, after the French fries are fried for the second time, you take them out of the basket, you drain off the oil by tapping it, You place it into a bowl, and then you, on the side, you apply a little bit of salt. Salt has a property, two properties in this case. It helps for the seasoning, there's no doubt about that, but also helps to keep that French fry nice and crisp. So let's go through this all over again. For the French fries, we're going to peel the potatoes. We're going to cut them into their natural size without excessive trimmings. We're going to make sure that you follow the guidelines of the shape, except for the length. They should be the same size, each and every one of them individually. We're going to fat blanch them at 275 degrees Fahrenheit with no color. Take them out, place on a tray, cool them down. When we are ready to serve, we are going to refry these potatoes at a higher temperature of 375 degrees till they're golden brown. Take it out of the fryer into a bowl, sprinkle it with salt, and that's how we're going to serve our potatoes, our French fries. Again, before we get into the videos, I want to repeat that we will not be frying our French fries at home. We will be baking them. Follow the guidelines of cutting the potatoes into the natural size, natural cuts. Make sure you toss them up in a little bit of vegetable oil. You can place some salt in there, place them on a tray lined with parchment paper, and bake them at 375 to 400 degrees till they get that color and they're fully cooked. All the chefs know that this is happening during this lab, so make sure you follow those guidelines. If you do not have a fryer at home, you are not required to fry these French fries. So let's watch these videos, and then we'll come back and summarize all over again. So let me open up my screen right to the bake and identifying the ingredients. You need russet potatoes, really important. You also need some water on the side and a peeler. So processing your potatoes to a natural size. So box off your potatoes, keep the natural length, box off your potatoes, and then make sure you cut your potatoes into, I'm going to say about finger size lengths for that matter, and keep them all uniform. So it's really important to keep those potatoes uniform from a cooking perspective. That is the reason why we cut these potatoes and we have our vegetable cuts and stuff like that. Now, again, these potatoes, like I said, they are generally dirty. You always want to peel into a bowl. If you are going to peel those potatoes without washing onto your chopping board, then in that case, your chopping board needs to be scrubbed down again. Couple of things to keep in mind from a cross-contamination point of view. Just make sure that those potatoes are clean or peel into a bowl. That's a general guideline that is always used. Now, the edge of that peeler, there's a sharp edge where you can take off any of the peels or potato heads that you might see. Some peelers are a Y peeler, some peelers are a straight peeler. It depends what you want to use. You can use them accordingly in terms of taking off those heads. So here's what chef is doing. He's just topping the top and the bottom, natural length, however, and lightly squaring off those potatoes, just lightly, not too much of trimmings. So natural length, lightly squaring off those potatoes, and now he is going to cut them into the thicker slices based on what the requirement is in terms of the size of the potatoes. So the square potatoes, he's showing you it's about a 1 centimeter width, so natural sizes there. So absolutely beautiful pieces of potato in there, a russet potato, and now he is going to just cut them into strips into French fries. So let's watch the end of this video. At every given point of time, these potatoes are definitely placed in cold water. At no point of time should you be keeping these potatoes without being placed in cold water. They will oxidize on you, okay? So follow these guidelines in terms of creating your French fries. Natural size, natural length, about 1 centimeter width, and that's how you would cut your French fries. Let's roll the video right till the end so that I don't miss out on any information. Okay, so the potatoes have been cut and they are going to be ready to be used. So next video is on fat blanching these potatoes. Like I said to you, if you do not have a fryer at home, please do not fat blanch. So here is where you would take your potatoes, toss them in a bowl with a little bit of oil, pat them dry, toss them in the bowl with oil, and place them in the oven. Okay. If you are frying them at home in a fryer, you got to make sure that you are safe. If you're using a pot, the temperature is about 375 to 400 degrees. Again, for fat blanching, it's 275. For finishing, it's 375 to 400. So please keep this in mind when you are cooking your potatoes at home. Not necessary for you to fry them, but just the guideline or the right technique. So in the industry or in the school, we do have our own fryers. It's important to understand that we will use them in the fryers in a more safe environment. Also, here's a technique that chef is showing you. Do not throw your potatoes into the hot fat. It will splash back on you and burn you. So you want to make sure you place them very delicately on a slotted spoon or a spider spoon and gently release them into the fryer or into the oil, into the whole fat. Never throw a piece of food into the fire because it will jump right back at you. Okay, so I'm looking at the video, and once those fries have been cooked or they're soft, as you can see, absolutely no color or little or no color, but you want to make sure that they are fried thoroughly well. You take it out and cool them on a tray. The technique of actually shaking off the excessive oil is totally necessary. Sometimes you use a spoon, sometimes you use a deep fry basket. So either or, you place them on a tray and let them cool till you're ready to cook them again. Remember, when you are ready to cook them, you have to increase that temperature. The internal temperature, or should I say of the fat, is 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you will refry your potatoes to the right degree of doneness. Okay. Again, no necessity for you to fry your potatoes at home. You can roast them at the same temperature, 375 to 400, and it's perfectly fine. But make sure you do not fry your potatoes if you don't have the right pieces of equipment. Returning the fat, same technique, returning the potatoes back to the fat. You want to protect yourself. You do not want to throw them in. Gently slide the potatoes back in there. And now is where you are going to fry these potatoes to a light golden brown color. This is where you are dehydrating all the moisture in there, and the potatoes are getting nice and crisp on the outside, yet they are soft on the inside. Drain off or use a piece of absorbent paper so that the potatoes do not leach out any fat. And once and only until they come out of the fat, should you take your potatoes and toss them up in a little bit of salt. This is an absolute necessary and important stage in the process of making your French fries. Okay. So service of your potatoes. Again, I would like to see a picture of these potatoes on a plate, neatly arranged and organized. And again, for those of you who are doing a live evaluation, make sure all of these are ready before you call chef for your live evaluation. Again, these are your French fries, perfectly seasoned, perfectly fried, and that's all that's there to it in terms of your French fries. Let me roll the rest of the video. Okay, so that is with your, let me turn this off. That is with your French fries. And again, here's where I would pause and ask anybody for questions, but there's nobody in this class, so I'm going to move along to the next slide. I just wanted to throw in a couple of pieces of information on deep fried potatoes. There are other varieties of deep fried potatoes. The top left-hand side is known as gaufrette. Gaufrette is a type of game chip where you would use a mandolin. And I'm going to play a video on the mandolin so that you understand what a mandolin is and how we use it. The potato on the top right is known as Dauphine potatoes. Then Dauphine is mashed potatoes mixed with choux paste. It's almost the same guidelines that you would prepare a churro. A churro is the Mexican dessert, same style, except that this has got potato and that is a batter. The potato on the bottom left is known as pont neuf. Pont neuf is a really larger piece of potato, which is arguably classically fried in duck fat. And last but not the least, the potato on the bottom right side is known as allumette. Allumette is shoestring or matchstick potatoes. And again, all these potatoes are all deep fried, but I just wanted to throw it out there so that you have some extra information. So let's watch this video on mandolin. And this video is again from Wiley, and I'm just going to play it just to show you a little bit of a guideline in terms of the potatoes.
Decorative cuts add an attractive element to a variety of dishes. Mandolins are specialized tools that help you create precision cuts. Mandolins are a beneficial addition to today's modern kitchen. When using a mandolin, be sure to follow safety instructions and sanitary guidelines. There are a variety of mandolins on the market. We will look at 3 models most suitable for a professional kitchen. These mandolins can produce cuts needed for traditional and contemporary applications on a variety of fruits and vegetables. The traditional French-style mandolin has high carbon steel blades. This mandolin makes a variety of classic and modern precision cuts. Levers are used to adjust the thicknesses of slicing to create julienne, ribbon, ripple, and gaufrette or waffle cut. The Japanese-style mandolin is a lightweight model made of a heavy-duty plastic. This mandolin has a flat-mounted blade that is adjustable to create paper-thin to 1/8-inch thick slices. It has 3 interchangeable, extremely sharp stainless steel blades. These blades are able to produce fine to thick julienne, ribbon cuts, and slices of different widths. The classic gaufrette cut cannot be made using a Japanese mandolin. Always use the plastic protector when cutting on this type of mandolin. The swing mandolin is a slicing device made out of composite. It is a scaled-down version of the traditional French mandolin and produces similar cuts and sizes. This model includes a straight and serrated blade used for julienne, slicing, ripple, and gaufrette cuts. There is also a dicing attachment used for fine and small dice. We will demonstrate the classic gaufrette cut, which will produce waffle cut potatoes. You will need a clean and sanitized cutting board, a room temperature peeled potato and water, a clean bowl of water for your waffle chips, a clean absorbent towel or sanitary non-skid mat, and a French-style mandolin. Place the mandolin on the damp towel or mat to keep it from sliding. Adjust the serrated blade to the desired thickness of your cut using the lever on the underside. Be sure that the flat blade is flush so the potato glides cleanly over the area. Place the potato at the top of the mandolin, gripping it with a guard in your cutting hand. The first pass will not cut the potato, but it will make grooves in your potato. Reserve the trim for a later use. Now turn the potato to a 45-degree angle, running the potato down the length of the mandolin. Repeat this process, turning at a 45-degree angle, gliding over the mandolin until the potato cuts are complete. Place the waffle cuts in a bowl with water to prevent discoloration. Save the trim in another bowl for a later use. Your gaufrette or waffle chips are now ready for cooking.
Okay, and that was your video on how to use a mandolin. Excellent piece of equipment and used every day in the kitchen today. Again, the two versions are a French version mandolin and the other one is a Japanese style mandolin, but both have their utility in the kitchen. So moving along to our next video, let me see. Okay, here we go. So the next video is on Dauphine potatoes, and this is a bit complicated in terms of process, but at the same time, it's easily doable. The important thing to keep in mind is the size of the foil pan that we are using. Now, this recipe, as per the manual, has been customized to the use of this foil pan, which is a quarter foil pan. You also require the lid for this quarter foil pan. So keep that in mind when you are shopping for your ingredients, that this is a quarter foil pan. Okay, so as we can see from the pictures, you layer up the potatoes, you layer them up with in between the slices with the cream, with some the two types of cheese, salt, white pepper, and then eventually you brown it and cook it and bake it in the oven. The actual cooking time for this is generally about 45 minutes to an hour. And the testing for these potatoes when they are done is using a sharp paring knife right in the center. And when you place it in there, you should be able to feel it go nice and smoothly to the bottom and not have a crunch. We are not looking for a cooked crunch when we are cooking potatoes. That's only for the purpose of beans and carrots and broccoli and stuff like that. However, for potatoes, we want to make sure that the starch is fully converted, fully cooked, and the knife should come out clean. One more thing to keep in mind, we are using yellow flesh potatoes. Peel the skin off, make sure you use a mandolin to slice them, but do not soak them in water. Yes, we are going to go against all the rules here. Do not soak these potatoes in water. Why? Because the starch, you require the starch to form the layer. So if you look at the slide here on the top right side, there are layers in here, and the only way they coagulate together is because of that starch. Of course, there's cream and cheese in there, but it's the starch is really important, so do not soak them. Another important tip, do not pre-slice all your potatoes. So have them peeled in the water, unsliced, and then as you require to layer them, you slice one potato, you layer it, you slice the next potato, you layer it, you slice the third potato, you layer it. So don't slice all 4 or 5 potatoes together and then start layering, they will start oxidizing. So therefore, you have your mise en place ready before you actually start slicing your potatoes and layering your potatoes. Make sure you have your cream mixture ready, which consists of the garlic, a little bit of salt, pepper, bay leaf. It is strained and everything else is reduced to the right temperature before you actually start layering. If you want to get a really good slice, as in the top right side, you need to make sure you cool down this potato, chill it. That means you place it in the refrigerator. So really what I'm advertising to you is making it in advance. If you try and slice this potato while it is still hot, it will disintegrate on you and it will crumble or fall aside even though it is fully cooked. Again, gratin is a culinary term in which ingredients are topped and generally browned to a crust. Sometimes you use breadcrumbs and sometimes, or most times, you use grated cheese as well. And we also use a piece of equipment that is known as a salamander. Salamander is the heat that comes up from the surface, and when you brown the cheese, it is known as to gratinate. So I have placed 2 types of videos in here. If you want to watch a video, this is from my private collection. If you want to watch a video on how to create that Dauphine, you can watch this video, but we will focus on our video from Chef Kanchan and his team. And let's watch this video and we'll go through the do's and don'ts of preparing the Dauphine potatoes. Okay. So identifying the ingredients, we got 35% cream, grated Parmesan cheese, we've got Gruyere, some butter, nutmeg, bay leaf, garlic for sure, and a couple of pieces of yellow flesh potatoes. So these are the type of ingredients that we're going to use. We're also going to use a grater, a French mandolin with a guard for sure, and a microplane. So peel your potatoes, keep them in water, smash your garlic, grate your cheese, both of them, and have them ready for the purpose of assembling all of these ingredients together. First thing we're going to do is we are going to create the cream, or infusing and reducing the cream for the purpose of layering. So take a pot, place the cream into the pot, you just place it in there, and then you bring it up to a boil. You place your bay leaf, you place your crushed garlic in there so that it infuses, and salt and pepper, and you reduce this cream down. So once you reduce this cream down, it is going to have a really thicker consistency, and this is going to help in terms of layering it. Again, make sure you use white pepper only. Black pepper tends to leave a little bit of black specks in the white cream, and you don't want that in the finished Dauphine potato. So once the cream has come up to a boil and you've reduced it down, you want to strain away all of the other ingredients that are in there. So using a strainer, get rid of the garlic, get rid of the bay leaf, get rid of nothing else. That's pretty much that's in the cream. So you really want to reduce it down from about 300 mils to about, from 400 to 300. So I'm going to say 2/3 of that quantity, and that should work perfectly fine. Remember, it is a recipe that is designed for the purpose of using a quarter foil pan. So it's important that you understand that all of these ingredients are only going to work for a quarter foil pan in terms of the quantity, in terms of the height, in terms of baking, in terms of temperature, and everything else. So those are the key guidelines you need to keep in mind. Okay. Let me roll this video right till the end before we get into the layering. Okay. So the cream, as you can see, is nice and thick. It's reduced to 2/3, from 400 down to 300, and that should work for this recipe. Make sure that you have grated your cheese. There's really nothing, should I say, exciting about this, except that when you come to the rind, you do not grate the rind. So you also want to use, there are 2 sides to the box grater. One is a thicker version, one is a thinner version. I prefer to go with the thinner version always, because it is always going to help in terms of melting the cheese and even distribution. Okay, so I'm just going to forward this video. It's pretty straightforward. You can always watch it again. Remember, once you come to the rind, you do not want to go to the edge. Also keep in mind that the rind, the grater is really sharp. Please be careful when you are grating this cheese and you do not grate any pieces of your finger, or for that matter, your nails into the cheese. Using a microplane, you can also use this for the technique of grating in terms of really fine cheese, or for that matter, garlic for that matter. This is another piece of equipment that can be used for the purpose of grating. So your choice in terms of how you want to grate your cheese, but just keep in mind the rind is not something that you can grate. Okay. So I'm going to roll the end of this video. Slicing the potatoes using a mandolin. We have seen the original video from Wiley, but this is chef showing you how you would go about organizing that mandolin. Again, the mandolin has to be placed on its stand. You are more than welcome to use your domestic mandolin or a Japanese style mandolin for the purpose of creating the slices. The slices are really important to understand. You do not have them too thick. You use the, should I say, the adjuster in terms of the thickness of the slice, which moves the lever up and down in terms of thickness of the potatoes. So accordingly, you know how thick or thin the slices should or should not be. Okay. Always use a guard when using a mandolin. The mandolin is basically a sharp knife, and you are just slicing vegetables or potatoes for that matter over it. If you do not use a guard and by accident your finger comes across this blade, you will cut your finger really badly. So make sure you keep that in mind when using a mandolin. Always use a guard. Okay. Let's focus on slicing the potatoes. So now, as you can see, I'm going to pause this video right here. As you can see, those potatoes have been slightly squared off. They're not squared off to a degree where we're going to cut them into dices, or for that matter, we're going to cut them into cubes or what have you. It is just squared off slightly so that it fits perfectly at the edges of that foil pan. And that's the reason why. So just cut it into half, top and bottom it, and then place it into your guard, and then slice your potatoes on your mandolin. Remember, do not slice all your potatoes at one time. Slice one potato at a time, layer it, and then slice the next potato. You do not place these potatoes in water. If you place them in water, you are going to lose your starch content. So you do not want to place your potatoes in the water. Okay. There you go. They are the slices that are required. So it's about 3 mm thickness in terms of the thickness of that potato for the purpose of layering it into your foil pan to create your Dauphine potatoes. Now, once you have your slices done, let's start assembling and finishing or baking this Dauphine potatoes. Remember the time factor. It takes a long time to bake these potatoes. So you want to make sure you place them into the oven the first thing. Preheat your oven. 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Line the bottom of the tray. I'm going to give you another tip. You make sure you place a piece of parchment paper on the bottom of that foil pan. The foil pan is a quarter foil pan. I cannot emphasize that more and more. You do not place it in a quarter foil pan, your recipe will go wrong, your cooking time will go wrong, and your doneness will go wrong. So there you go. You want to place a piece of parchment paper on the bottom. It's really good, especially when you are unmolding it. And here's the mise en place that is required for the purpose of creating this Dauphine potatoes. Okay, you're going to save a little bit of cheese right in the end for the top and final layer for the purpose of getting that golden brown color, or for that matter, gratinating it. So it's important that you have that grated cheese on the side there. Now you start with the layering, as because of the slices, then they're squared up. You start layering each and every piece individually. Just don't dump these potatoes into the pan. No, that's not what we do. We almost layer them individually. And again, my rule of thumb is you can either start with the first 2 layers on the bottom, then you place your cheese, salt, pepper, cream, and then start building it till you've used up all of your potatoes. Do not place your potatoes in water. You want to make sure you keep it out. After each and every layer, you want to place your salt and white pepper, and this is for the purpose of seasoning it. Just a little bit of that cream. Sprinkle it right on top of those slices of potatoes. Place some grated cheese on top of it and continue to build it right till you reach the end of all of the slices. That's it. So that's the first layer done. Now you're going to start with the second layer. Repeat the same process. Okay, so once you have reached to the top of that pan, okay, the last layer, remember we saved some part of that cheese. The seasoning does not change, the cream does not change, but you would probably add a little bit extra cheese that you have saved on the side to the topping of that potato. And this is more for the purpose of creating a nice crusty layer, also nicely browning it, and that's what you want to achieve in terms of a finished Dauphine potatoes. Okay, here we go. So last piece of cream, make sure you use your cream and so that it suffices for all the layers of that preparation. Quarter foil pan is your key to success in this case. And then top it up with all the leftover cheese that you have. Just want to see how much of this video. I'm going to roll it right till the end so that we can see creating the top layer with the reserved cheese. Okay. Okay, so once you finish the top layer in there, you want to place a piece of parchment paper right on top of the cheese so it doesn't come in contact with the foil. Once you have it as is, then you place the foil side of the lid on top of that parchment paper, and then you can close it up for the purpose of baking. Now, this foil pan is extremely heavy. It's not going to support itself. You need to place it on a baking tray. So before it goes into the oven, place this foil pan on a baking tray so that it works well when you're taking it in and out. Always use a side towel when you are placing your ingredients into the oven. So always make sure you use a side towel. So if you place it on a tray in there and you take it off, this is what it looks like. So I'm going to pause this video here. You want to make sure that you clean the sides of that foil pan before it goes into the oven. The cheese would have all been melted. If for some reason you find that there is no color and you've removed it out, it's okay to take out the top layer of that foil pan and finish baking it for the last 5 to 10 minutes without that lid so that you can get a nice color. Okay, so these are really, really important factors to keep in mind while baking these Dauphine potatoes. Excellent. So I'm going to escape from this video and go back to the sheet here, just going through all of the do's and don'ts. Like I said, there's another video out here which I've placed that you can open it up and view it in your screens as well. Okay, so moving along, I just wanted to point out what is a salamander. A salamander is generally the heat that comes up from the surface of this piece of equipment. It is used for browning or gratinating pieces of food, especially cheese. When the term gratinate is used, especially when we are referring to browning cheese. And here's another wonderful piece of equipment, salamander, which has different layers in terms of levels, should I say. You can increase the shelf to the top level, to the bottom level, but it's the same technique, same principle in terms of browning it. So cook it in a traditional oven. If you don't find there's enough of color, you can always put on the broiler or the salamander and get a little bit of color, but that's all that's there to it in terms of gratinating and using a salamander. Next, we are going to talk about cooking or making a mashed potato. And we have made this a million times, but there are a couple of do's and don'ts in this preparation. First and foremost, you need a piping bag and you need a star tip. Generally, an 8-number star tip works well, a really, really large one, and you need to get a nice big piping bag. Now, you also want to make sure that you cook your yellow flesh potatoes. So you peel them, take out the heads, absolutely no heads in these potatoes, cut them into not necessarily small pieces, but medium to large pieces, cover them up with water. Always bring it up to a boil. So we are placing these potatoes in cold water. We start cooking our potatoes in cold water, never in hot water. So again, peel your potatoes, wash them, take off the heads, cut them into medium to large pieces, place them in cold water, cover them up totally, bring them up to a boil. It's okay to season up this pot with salt and then drop it to a simmer and then cook your potatoes, testing it with a knife so that they are done. The important part of making a mashed potato is to rice these potatoes while they are still hot. We do not wait for those potatoes to cool down because it'll be twice as harder to rice them or smash them up. You want to make sure that you work with them while they're still hot. Once the potatoes are cooked and you drain off the water, it's important to air dry the potatoes. Air drying the potatoes is a technique where you drain off the water, you place the pot back onto the stove without anything else, and all the moisture that is in there will convert into steam. 30 seconds to a minute at the most. It's called air drying the potatoes. You want these potatoes to be nice and hot and dry. A couple of videos in here. You can go ahead and watch the piping video in here. So different types of piping skills that I've shown you, especially how you go about filling a piping bag, holding it in terms of using the pressure on the back end of your hand for the purpose of piping. So here you can watch that video. We are going to focus on this video here for the purpose of this class. So let me open that screen up, and we are going to start with identifying the ingredients, identifying the equipment that we require. So yellow flesh potatoes, salt, white pepper, some butter, and 35% cream for the purpose of creaming down these potatoes. Piping bag, startup nozzle, number 5 or 6, chef says, which is good enough. I'll go with that. A ricer or a moolie in terms of ricing those potatoes. So once you peel your potatoes, always in cold water, you want to start with processing your potatoes. Oh, you do need nutmeg for this purpose as well. So make sure you have a piece of nutmeg handy for the purpose of grating it into this mashed potato. Okay. So dicing the potatoes, again, there is no real guideline in terms of squaring the potatoes and stuff like that. We are making a mashed potato, so it really does not matter. You want to cut those potatoes, again, like I said, not too big, not too small. Keep it medium. I would go medium to large. I will almost think that if your potatoes are too small, they tend to get waterlogged, and you want your potatoes dry more than anything else. So follow the guidelines in terms of how you cut your potatoes, and that should work perfectly fine. Always, always, always keep your potatoes in cold water so that you can prevent them from oxidizing. Straightforward, just cutting them. Once your potatoes are cut, cold water, season it, then you can bring it up to a boil. So I'll wait for the entire video. I think this it is in the same video where we start cooking these potatoes. Here goes, here's your pot and your water. So again, remember the temperature of the water is cold. Okay, so you want to make sure that you use cold water or tap water, not refrigerated water. Water comes out from the tap, and that's how you would start cooking your potatoes. Bring it up to a boil. Remember, you can always season up your water because the potatoes will absorb the flavor of the poaching liquid. Therefore, it is important to season up those potatoes. Once the water comes up to a boil, you can drop it to a simmer, and then you can simmer down those potatoes till they are cooked. How you check for the doneness? You take a paring knife, you poke the potatoes, and you want to make sure it's soft. We are not looking for a cooked crunch. We want to cook the starch thoroughly so that the potatoes are fully cooked. Strain off the liquid, then you can return it back to the pot to air dry it. But once those potatoes are strained and you see that they're steaming and they're cool to the touch, start ricing them. We do not cool down these potatoes after they are cooked. We start ricing those potatoes almost immediately once you drain off all the liquid from those potatoes. So this next video is using a ricer, or what we like to call a moolie. You can use a hand ricer as well. But those of you who do not have a moolie or a hand ricer, you can use a potato masher. Just be careful. You will not be able to get it to a piping bag with a star tip if your potato is not mashed up thoroughly. So it's important to make sure that you use the right piece of equipment. Assembling of this moolie, just taking away the lid, there is, should I say, the turner in there, and then there's a grater on the bottom where the potatoes come through, and that's how you would go about assembling it. I generally place my moolie on a pot because it's nice and stable, and place all the potatoes in here. Here is where you would use your rubber spatula. It's a great piece of equipment that is used to scrape down the sides of the bowl, to push down all the potato that comes through. And once you finish it, just flip the ricer on the bottom and you'll see a lot of potatoes stuck on the bottom where you can scrape out all the excessive potato from there as well. Okay. So no lumps whatsoever. This is absolutely superb in terms of texture, in terms of ricing those potatoes. Now, once your potatoes have been riced, you need to cream them down. Creaming them down is literally adding the cream and the butter to it. So you take the cream, you heat up the cream, you add the butter to it, you melt the butter in that cream, you reduce it down to half. And here's my guideline. So once you have that ready, you can remove it out and place it on the side, return that mashed potato to the pan, and then add in the cream, reduced cream and melted butter into the pan so that you get the right consistency. Just because the recipe says to add, to heat up so much of cream, judge by the consistency, whether you want to add all the cream or you just want to add what is required. So the texture should be nice and creamy, but at the same time, it should be stiff. You do not want to add too much. If you add too much, the chances of your mashed potato turning into a very, very slack puree are high. Therefore, you want to add only as much as you require. So remember that. Keep that, and you can do all of this on the range top. Chef is just using a bowl because he does not have that heat burner in the side there. So just for the purpose of the video, you want to add in accordingly, depending on what the texture. The texture generally is a dropping consistency. It's not pouring consistency. It is a dropping consistency. So it's important to keep that in mind when preparing your mashed potatoes. Now, for the service of this mashed potatoes, you can watch that video in terms of how to fill the piping bag. So the piping bag, you generally open it up to half over your hand, holding your hand on the bottom. Then you take your tip of that, that nozzle tip, and you place it into the piping bag right to the bottom. If this is a new piping bag and you're cutting it for the first time, do not cut too much out of it. Just cut it just over the tip. You should only be able to see just the edge of the tip. Do not cut too much of it, because otherwise the entire tip will come out of the piping bag. So you don't want to do that, okay? For making it easier to fill the piping bag, you can also place the piping bag on top of a plastic container, open up the edges, then fill up the piping bag, and then hold it in your hand, okay? So you push it all down to the edge, and then you usually twist it up, and then you start piping it. Now, the shape of the piping, again, we'll follow what Chef has displayed here in the video. You don't need to go fancy, but at the same time, what you're displaying here is the texture and the technique of piping. Again, it is an important skill. You want to make sure that you use the skill for the purpose of demonstrating your mashed potatoes, okay? Excellent. I'm going to stop that video right there before we go into the next video. And a couple of guidelines. Like I said, you want to make sure you can watch the other video here as well for your piping skills. And I think so this one will give you a good guideline in terms of how to hold the piping bag and fill the piping bag. As you can see, the texture of these potatoes are really, really firm. They're not too soft, and it really helps in the purpose of piping. Okay. So I'm going to move along to the next slide. I don't have anything else in terms of piping potatoes. So we are going to focus on the next skill, which is the roasted fingerling potatoes. For the roasted fingerling potatoes, look at the oven temperature. The oven temperature is pretty high. You are baking your Dauphine potatoes at 375. This one is around 450. You want to go really high. You want to make sure you infuse flavor into that oil with the garlic. Once you have that garlic flavored oil ready, you want to toss these potatoes really well with the oil, place them on a baking tray with a parchment paper, and you want to roast these potatoes for about 20 to 25 minutes. Check for doneness using a paring knife. Once you have done all of that, you take out the potatoes, you toss it up with the rest of the flavored oil, and you serve it or you return it back to the oven. So let's get on with watching the videos for, oops, went ahead for this roasted fingerling potatoes. So I'll open up the big screen and we'll watch these videos. So identifying the ingredients and the mise en place for the purpose of creating a roasted fingerling potatoes. So fingerling potatoes, rosemary, garlic, and a little bit of olive oil that you require for your recipes. Okay. Wash the potatoes, trim any bruises and edges, and cut them into half. That's really, really ideal in terms of keeping the natural length of the potatoes. Remember, cut it lengthwise. Do not cut it into half as in breadthwise. Keep the potatoes as long as possible. Okay. Creating the infused oil. Always started with a cold pan, place the olive oil in there, peel your garlic, smash your garlic or crush your garlic, and then add it into your oil. You do not want to burn this garlic because it will give you a burnt flavor coming through. It's really, really, should I say, potent in terms of transferring flavor. So you just want it lightly to infuse the flavor, and then eventually you want to get rid of that garlic. So now you have a garlic flavor infused into this oil. You can use the garlic, but the garlic will tend to burn a little bit more. Therefore, you want to make sure you sort of strain away the garlic from this oil. And that's the oil you would use to toss your potatoes in there. Okay, so you have the garlic oil in there, you have salt, you have black pepper. Place of these potatoes into a bowl, and then you want to start tossing these potatoes and getting them ready for the purpose of cooking. Remember, your oven has been preheated to 450 degrees already. So keep that in mind. You're going to go into a preheated oven. The time is only about 25 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes. For testing, you are going to use a paring knife where you will test the doneness for the center or in the center of the potato so that you know that the potatoes are cooked. We are not looking for a cooked crunch when it comes to potatoes. We are always going to make sure the starch is perfectly cooked, and you want to get a nice soft touch when you remove that paring knife. Salt, black pepper, infused oil, potatoes peeled, washed, trimmed, cut lengthwise, not breadthwise, and on a tray lined with parchment paper for the purpose of roasting it. Okay, so let's see chef placing it on a tray, roasting tray lined with parchment paper. Place all the potatoes on there. If you want to take it one step ahead, you can always turn the flesh side on the bottom and then eventually turn them over on the skin side. So you get a nice color, caramelization color. This just like what chef is doing, turning the open or exposed sides of that potato straight away into the bottom of the tray where the heat is the maximum, and you get a nice caramelized color on there. So this goes into a preheated oven, and let's see, once those potatoes come out, we'll toss it up with the rosemary, a little bit of oil, and return it back into the oven, and then or serve it. Okay, so this video is out of place. This should have been much before the potatoes have been cut. So chef is just demonstrating in terms of taking away any bruises and cutting away the top and the bottom of that potato. And then again, he will demonstrate the cutting of the potatoes into the lengthwise. Okay. So again, this should have been this video should have been prior to placing those potatoes on the baking tray. That's the lengthwise cut that I was referring to. Okay. And again, straight away into cold water so that it does not oxidize. Prepping the rosemary. And again, the rosemary is a really potent herb. You want to make sure that you chop your rosemary really, really fine so that you can hold it. I do not want to cut my rosemary too much in advance. It does have a good shelf life, but it tends to also oxidize and get black on you. So you don't want to cut your rosemary too much so that it oxidizes to a color where it is not being used. Okay, so that's good enough, and we'll see what chef is doing in terms of chopping up the rosemary and getting it ready for the purpose of tossing it into those potatoes once they are cooked and they come out of the oven. So let's give you a quick recap. Wash your potatoes, trim your potatoes, cut it into half lengthwise, infuse your oil, strain away the garlic, toss your potatoes in that oil, salt, black pepper, place the flesh side down on a roasting tray lined with parchment paper, preheated oven, place them into the oven. Once they are in the oven, 20 to 25 minutes only. You are going to test them using a paring knife. Once they are roasted, they're going to come out of the oven. So halfway through the roasting process, you want to sprinkle it with a little bit of rosemary. I would also give you a suggestion that you can place a little bit of olive oil in that rosemary so that you can sprinkle it and make sure they do not burn as well. And chef is during the halfway cooking process turning away the potatoes onto their skin side. The ideal texture should be a nice golden brown color on the surface. On the bottom, that skin, because they are a new potato style, they will get nice and crisp on you as well. So that's what you're looking for in terms of roasting this fingerling potatoes. Again, freely available, but at the same time, you want to make sure you buy the right type of potatoes. If you are having a problem getting a fingerling potatoes, you can always get in a new potato, which is red or for that matter, white. Okay, so again, place them into the oven, preheated oven, and we're just going to finish those potatoes before we are ready to serve it. So here goes. Potatoes are done. Chef is going to test it using a knife, paring knife. Again, you can see the color on the potatoes, both on the surface as well as on the bottom. And that's how you would go about serving your potatoes. So for the purpose of finishing it onto a plate, like I said, if you add a little bit of olive oil, it works great in terms of a dressing, or you can just finish sprinkling it with the chopped rosemary, and that's how you would serve your roasted fingerling potatoes. Okay, so that is pretty much the end of all the official videos in terms of this class. I will give you a quick recap. Let me get to the next slide. A quick recap. We are preparing our French fries. Remember, we do not want to place them in a fryer if we don't have the right fryer. We want to make sure that we use a baking tray. Temperature is 375. However, the two techniques are fat blanching, and the next one is deep frying for the purpose of serving it. Always season your potatoes after they have been fried. Then we are going to create a Dauphine potatoes. Yellow flesh potatoes. Slice your potatoes one at a time after they have been peeled. Make a reduction of your cream and garlic from 400 to 300. Grate your cheese. Once you have your mise en place ready, use a quarter foil pan only. Place your parchment paper on the bottom, start layering it with the potatoes, salt, pepper, cheese, cream, till you come to the bottom. Reserve some extra cheese to finish it on top. Parchment paper, foil lid into the oven, cook it for about 45 minutes to an hour. Doneness, check with a knife, make sure they're nice and soft. If there's not enough color, take off the lid and brown it without the lid for another 15 minutes. If you're going to cut it and serve it, cool it down in the refrigerator at least 6 to 8 hours before cutting it so that it sets properly. Then the next one is the pomme puree. You want to cut them into medium to large pieces, cover them in cold water, start them in cold water, bring it up to a boil, season up the water, drop it down to a simmer, test with a paring knife, make sure it comes out clean, air dry it, and then rice it or mash it while it's still hot. Create a reduction of cream and butter, add the salt, white pepper, nutmeg, and only enough of cream and butter mixture to your mashed potatoes so it forms a nice stiff puree consistency. Place it into a piping bag using a star tip 5 or 6 number, and then pipe it and serve it accordingly in terms of what the video shows you. And last but not the least, the roasted fingerling potatoes. Trim them, cut them lengthwise, create an infused oil with garlic and olive oil, toss the potatoes, salt, black pepper, infused oil, flesh side on the bottom of a roasting tray lined with parchment paper, roast them for 20 to 25 minutes, test with your paring knife, take them out halfway, add the rosemary, return them back to the oven, and once before you serve them, you can sprinkle a little bit more rosemary and olive oil just to serve it. So in a nutshell, that is what the lab is, those 4 skills that are required. Make sure you are ready to present all of these during your live evaluation with either Chef Symington or myself. Here are a couple of health and safety guidelines, and I cannot emphasize that enough. Do not attempt to deep fry at home. Please, please be safe. Use your French fries or bake your French fries in an oven. Temperature 375 to 400 works fine. Use the same techniques. You do not need to blanch. Just straight away toss it in a little bit of oil onto a tray and bake them. Okay, so that's how you would go about it. Always use a side towel in terms of when you are taking out stuff from the oven. Both sides, not one only. Always use 2 hands to hold your trays. And again, unplug your electric stoves, ovens when you're cleaning and stuff like that. So keep all of these in mind when you are cooking in your kitchen and stay extremely safe. Again, refer to your manual for recipes. You know the guidelines in terms of what is required in terms of the pictures, taking overhead shot of your ingredients before you move ahead. Also taking pictures and of your end products. That's really important. And most importantly, always to serve some process pictures. So in between what is happening. So make sure you take a lot of pictures in there. I've spelled them out here in terms of what are the requirements. You know, you will be evaluated based on these guidelines. Again, I've placed them in there. You are required to cut and bake your French fries. You do not need to use your deep fat fryer. So keep all of these things in mind when you are creating your presentations. Okay. Reflection, focus on the taste, texture, aroma of your individual products, not one for everything. Also make sure that you, if you want to elaborate, you go into the disappointments as well as the improvements, what you were disappointed with, what you would improve it, because that tells me or tells us that you have learned the mistakes that you made and you're ready to actually take it to the next level in terms of whatever else you require to do. Okay. I just wanted to throw in the mise en place shot. You know, all of this, what are the requirements of your station setup? Make sure you place your ingredients on there and take your pictures as well. For those of you who I've spoken with, make sure you place your student ID card to take your pictures to show that that's your pictures only. I want to see a picture of your clean stations. Do not show me this picture of your dirty utensils. So make sure you do that as well. So before you take your quiz, I have placed, oops, I think so. There's a video running in the back. No, it's okay. So before you get your go for your test, make sure you go through your Kahoot. I've placed it in here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up here so that you see the game pin number. So what you do is you join that Kahoot, and then you place the pin, and the pin is 9834654. So if you're doing it alone by yourself, you need to place this pin into that Kahoot and then place start. Okay, only until and unless you do that will you be able to go through that Kahoot. So remember, this is about review for the entire demo that has happened today. And again, once you play that Kahoot, you will be able to, you should do your quiz after that. Okay, so I'm going to end that here. Oh, sorry, I should have gone to the next slide more than anything else. Next, points for success. We've gone through this before. Organize mise en place. Make sure you have everything ready. Take your pictures before you move to the next slide. Read on your assignment and what the requirements are so that you know exactly what is required to do or not. Oops, my slides are moving ahead. Again, the quiz is open for 3 days and the assignments are due to Chef Alvarez and Chef Symington by Friday, 5 o'clock. Or unless you have other arrangements with your professors. Okay, you'll find all the links to the videos, to the reference material manual on Blackboard. You can always go there and do it as well. So last but not the least, remember, when you are on the team site and you are playing this video recorded, I would like you to go in there and click on this link so that you can take your attendance. I need you to mention your student ID, your name, your lab chef's name. So there is a link placed in there already for February 15th. This is a pre-recorded demo, so I need to see that your attendance is taken there, and then I will download it just before the lab, and I will send it over to Chef Symington and a copy for myself. Okay. Last slide. Oops. Last slide for next week. Generally, because this is foundations, we do not have a final test. However, in every other course, which is the next 7 weeks and the weeks after that, you will have a final exam in week 7. However, there is no final exam in week 7 of foundations. We will be cooking rice and legumes, and we will be talking about braised navy beans, risotto, and a saffron pilaf. So that's what's going to happen in week 7. It's a regular lab, and the labs are averaged based on the grades, I think, which is 13%. So no final exam in week 7. This is going to be, the week 7 is going to be the final week for foundations. After that, this week will collapse, and there will be a new course, Essentials with the Startup. Nothing will change in terms of where the link is and all of that. We'll talk about that next week, but I just want to make sure you understand that next week is week 7 and there will be no final exam. So I'm going to end this show in here, and I'm just going to bring my camera in the front here. So again, thank you everybody for this this demo. Again, it's a pre-recorded demo. I'm hoping you will get all the information. I want to say there are 2 parts to this demo. There's one part where I stopped and I started all over again. Not all over again. I started it right where I stopped. So in case you're looking for the information, there's 2 parts to this demo. And hopefully everything works for you. Feel free to type in in Teams if you have any questions. However, everything for this demo is expected on Wednesday's lab with Chef Symington and myself. Again, for those of you who are going for live evaluation, I'll do a really good briefing really before the class, and Chef Symington will do that as well. But hopefully this video helps you in your process of cooking. Any quick questions? Feel free to type it in the chat like always. If not, have a good family day, holiday, everyone. Thank you, everyone.